In this week's episode, a conversation about true leadership with a highly decorated retired Air Force pilot and former POW, prisoner of war, on how to deal with trauma, overcome it, and still have incredible success. He's a sought-after public speaker, and you will know why in just seconds. Major General John Borling is a highly decorated retired Air Force pilot, a business and civic leader, author, a former prisoner of war. He often jokes that he was John McCain's roommate. They were roommates during their time as POWs in Hanoi during the Vietnam War. In addition to his many years of service, Major General Borling is the director and chairman of the board of a biotech company called Synthonics, and the founder of SOS America. He's had an incredible life, and he's an extraordinary person to learn from. Here are Major General John Borling's insights on how to be successful and what to do when you fail, whether you're a seasoned CEO or just starting out in your career. For anyone who might not know your history, could you sum up how do you sum up your career? But could you just start with summing up even what you did in your military life?
Oh, you forced me into a self-serving mode at the beginning. I'm a 37-year Air Force veteran, went to the academy, was a fighter pilot, served worldwide in increasing positions of responsibility. My wife, now at 59 years, Myrna, was along for that ride, and we're still riding. After the military, we went home to Chicago, ran some businesses, one of it the CEO of United Way, and some other aspects of that, a member of the Commercial Club of Chicago, and have stayed active in both business and civic activities, or tried to anyway, over the last many years. Principally three things. I'm chairman of a business board of a biotech company, and we're very close to solution with respect to hypothyroid medicine, and we've got a great solution in a product called Electoral, which is a hemp oil-based product. I run SOS America, which is Service Over Self America. It argues that the military being a respected institution, more of our young people ought to participate in it, and we've got a program, kind of a second-tier program for those who don't qualify for the all-volunteer force. That's probably 4 out of 5 young Americans. That is not a nice story. So we'd like to get the rest and get them involved kind of as a nation building inside of America project. And as you know, I write a Sunday column called The Third Degree. It argues, Catherine, you'll find this very surprising. It argues that you have the capability to make your own decisions on matters personal and private. I just reserve the right to ask hard questions on those same subjects, referring to Socrates, who tells us that the unexamined life is not worth living. And so that's been running for about 3 years. I took it onto a subscription model 6 months ago, but I view it as a credible mental exercise and checking my own premises, if you were. But all I do is ask questions. The actions and the answers are yours. Now, you asked me a simple question, and I hope I've replied in a sufficiently brief manner to qualify me to be with you on this podcast as just another guy who stands tall and salutes Catherine Janicek for incredible capacities to communicate, to teach, to provide example. And isn't that what it's all about, providing example?
It is, and you have provided an extremely incredible example of how to be a human being. How
to be a human being?
How to be a good human being?
I think there's a sense of humanism about it, but I think we're also busy with activity and with taking strides on the personal stage that sometimes we forget that. So I'm glad you bring it up, but you always bring it up in the sense that well, this is how you can succeed, or this is what's important. And I've always thought that I've learned more from my screw-ups I would say, why don't we think about useless things? In fact, I would advance there are three most useless things in the world.
And what are they?
Well, I told you I was a fighter pilot, so I'll put it in military jargon, but it has universal expression. The three most useless things in the world are runway behind you, altitude above you, and 1 second ago. Now, if you think about that, the runway behind you probably is reflective of the options and the actions that you've already taken, and you hope you've got a good long runway in front of you where you can still develop other options, other actions that will make for a life of satisfaction, a life of adventure, a life of competition, a life that is vital. And so I think a lot about the runway behind me and focus sometimes on what I've learned, the mistakes I've made, the successes that you have that are always so transient. But I think a lot about runway behind and in front. And then altitude above you. That's where you get your energy. That's where you get the advantage of God's G or gravity. That's where you get your speed. That's where no one's going to follow a tired leader. So you got to have an energy level that is palpable, and you get that from altitude. So the stuff about if you can't get up there, you've got to get yourself up there. You've got to create that circumstance, both physically, mentally, spiritually, that gives you altitude.
Yes, and then your team will actually follow you. Cannot be an inspiration unless
Nobody
you have that altitude.
And then 1 second ago, you may think that that's too brief a moment. But I've had my life hang on the balances of 1 second. And in the end, time for all of us is our most important commodity. You never have enough time, especially in crisis situations. That's when time is most needed and is most valuable and is most absent. And that's how mistakes at individual level, at city, state, government levels, international levels are made, when all of a sudden events take over events and things get made or done often under pressures of time that cause miscalculation, that cause mistake. So those are the useless things. And the trick is to turn them into useful things. And I thought I wanted to make comment on that today. I'm talking to the VFW, state VFW convention in Wisconsin later in the week. And that occurred to me this morning while shaving that I might use that as you want to grab your audience in the first 20 seconds or so. So you stand up and you say, I want to talk to you about some really useless things. Now, even the guy in the back, slugging down the bourbon and water is going to say, he wants to talk to us about what?
Right. No one starts a speech like that. And it's really powerful. You had a lot of 1 seconds, like 1 second ago, you had a lot of moments where 1 second may have ended up a lot differently. And then you also got, you talk about time, the gift of time. You got the gift of time. Your life may absolutely have been cut extremely short. You were a POW who survived that and then wrote a book about the poems you were writing to your wife while being a POW to make sure she knew how much you loved her. Can you just talk about that? I don't know how you talk about that experience, but can you talk a little bit about how you talk about that experience?
I tell people who wrestle with events in their life that it's all right to look back, but don't stare. Don't stare. So when you ask me a question that is obviously in need of serious response, reflection on a long and difficult period, I'd start with that 6.5 years where I was away. First of all, survival was not the key. Survival with honor meant everything. Survival with honor. We wanted you to be proud of us, actually. And so our actions were, over those years, in isolation or semi-isolation for long periods of time, cut off from all communications. We developed a code, a tap code that we could tap through the walls to have some sense of being, belonging, some association, chain of command, if nothing else. It was forbidden by the North Vietnamese that we would do that, and they'd hurt you when they caught you doing it, and we did it all the time. But beyond the chain of command and beyond the resistance and the military circumstance, there was a need to stay sane. There was a need to, you're a runner, I'm a runner. My running these days is much like a snail in a coma, but I'm still out there plugging away, at it. And you run a lot. I used to run marathons, and my last marathon was 10-10-10 in Chicago. That's at the age of 70, that garrulous old age that I have not improved upon since. But the race we were running was an uncertain race. It's like you run the marathon, but you don't get to stop. You got to keep going. You're running this uncertain race, and you've got to make time. Going back to the notion of time, you got to make time an ally somehow. And people use different techniques. In my case, I have always been fascinated with literature. I'm an engineer by training, but I majored in humanities. I'm a great fan of liberal arts. I think it makes us, you were talking about humanism earlier, I think absent liberal arts exposure, education gained in school or out of school is absolutely essential to a vibrant America. The hell with a vibrant individual. Much more concerned about a vibrant American experiment continuing. So that love of music, love of the dance, love of art, love of literature. And I'd known Myrna for a long time. We met in high school. And what high school, early college guy, didn't put pen to paper with words of endearment, hopefully, other than roses are red. But even that counts. So don't back off of putting your hand at it. And so I started to write poems in my head. We didn't have anything to write with. And then I would tap it. We had this tap code, tap it through the walls. In case I didn't make it, I wanted my wife and little girl, who was 3.5 when I left, and 7 or 3.5 months when I left, and 7.5 years old when I walked back in the door. She's more like me, by the way, and the one we had after the war is more like her mother. So go figure that one out.
Genetics.
Yeah, it is.
Can't find it.
You know, Mom, you know that.
I know. I definitely have my own daughter. That's for sure.
So that's one of the books I've written and contributed to others, as you know, and I'm working on. So that's that long period that you have me talk too much about, and one of the ways you got through. But you leaned on your fellows, even though you're maybe talking through a wall. You leaned on your fellows and what they had to offer. I learned languages through a wall. Now my exit may be south side of Chicago, but I learned some languages. I spoke French, so I taught French to the wall. At least I speak enough French to be dangerous in bars on a Friday night. Actually, that's not true. Very dangerous in bars on a Friday night. Although I'm not turning heads in bars anymore. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sure you turned some heads. My goodness, you're one of the best.
There was this guy the other night, but I'm not sure that's a counter. No aspersions. By the way, I happen to believe that I believe in Freud, that one's sexual, there is no such thing as abnormal sex. And everything else is just proclivity and opportunity. So that hopefully will dig me out of the hole that I just dug with a certain community. But
no. That's good.
So how do you translate that experience into?
I wanted to ask. There's most people have not experienced that kind of level of stress, that trauma, don't carry that, but there's a lot of people in the world who do have stress and trauma. I mean, everybody has stress, period. Everybody has anxiety, but your level, and then being able to come out of that and still be so successful professionally and personally. how did you how do you deal with that? How did you deal with that decades ago? And then how do you continue to deal with that? Because that carries with you the rest of your life.
Well, I think the answer is the way we all do it, imperfectly. But I've got this mantra that I use whenever by the way, I've got a great therapist. And, I think everyone should have a great therapist. In my case, it's my wife, Myrna, who, when I feel a little morose, grabs me by the collar and slaps me across the cheeks and says, snap out of it. It's kind of like Moonstruck and Cher and Nicolas Cage, that wonderful scene, snap out of it. And come on, give me a break. You got to have a certain fiber. You know what's harder than the privation or the periods of desperation? That Thoreau had a great line. He said, the mass of men lead, by extension, mankind, the mass of men, lead lives of quiet desperation. And what is confirmed desperation is merely resignation. So while it's not my motto, I would think about it, never be resigned, never be resigned. And the phrase I use, the mantra, is just keep marching, pick them up, lay them down. You'll be surprised how much product or progress you make. And the real catch to all of this, I think, God, you're burrowing deep, Catherine, with your comments, or your questions. The real catch is, it's not how you deal with adversity. It's not how you deal with desperation. It's not how you deal even with sorrow. Most of us are equipped to do that. In fact, that happens to be the stuff of life. I mean, it brings punishment and reward. But the thing you have to worry about is the reward side, especially when the reward may be, in your view, unearned, or something that, and in most cases, it's because of the help and efforts of others that you get elevated or whatever. But the real problem is, how do you deal with success? How do you avoid the greatest sin of sins, the sin of arrogance? I've had a dose. It's hard to not, especially if you're in positions where you've got broad responsibilities and lots of folks under you, and you're yet young. You're only maybe in your 50s, and you need a way to watch out for that and to cure that, because in the end, ambition's fine, but be ambitious to do something rather than be somebody. You'll find that it tricks along, and one accompanies the other. And I am so imperfect. In fact, we ought to talk about how you deal in public life with imperfections. And gosh knows I've had some things that have been deep well kind of experiences. You want one?
Yeah, but I do want to ask you a quick question. So I'm going to ask you about the imperfections in a second, but you just really started to go down a path and then you stopped. And I just want to make sure, you talked about the trappings of success. You mentioned it. And that is really important. And then you said, don't be arrogant. You hit your 50s and you're like the top of your game and you start that arrogance.
Master of the universe.
Yes. And then you and I have sometimes talked about, you come off, you're a fighter pilot. You're a big presence. Okay. And you carry yourself a certain way, but you know the importance of also being vulnerable and open and you don't define it as being weak. It is not being weak. No one defines it as that. But can you talk about just that? Because you did say don't be arrogant, but how do you, as this leader and this civic leader and business leader and this fighter pilot, then try, how do you become more vulnerable and open so you can be a better leader?
Well, you don't have to be Jimmy Carter and say you're wrong and be weak. You can get an asthma check. You can, I really think that people don't define leadership, though we talk about it all the time. But nobody defines it. And there's one guy who defined it, he was my fourth great mentor, John Gardner. If people remember anything off this podcast, remember that you've got to run out to the bookstore, or actually now it's out of print, run to Amazon and get the paper back version of On Leadership by John Gardner, Gardner, the citizen of our times. You've got it?
I have it.
Yeah, no, it's a bedside reader. But in that book, you may recall that he says, he talks about leadership not in a checklist way, but in an evocative way and in a quite organized way. But he starts out by saying, leadership is the art of example and persuasion, whereby the leader or the leadership group agree to pursue certain objectives and goals. It's that simple. It's a process and an art of example and persuasion, but focus on process, art and of example and persuasion. Boy, that's powerful stuff.
It is.
You can, if you and I are flying in an airplane, and I shout out, scream out, eject, eject, and you say what? Well, you're talking to yourself, but absent those extreme circumstances where there needs to be instantaneous reaction, you work at trying to develop that climate where, and it's hard to do because it makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you understand your own mortality, and that's why CEOs and others in leadership positions often get cycled through, because they often become vulnerable. They become prey to their own devices or the devices of others, or the fortunes of war, if you will. We live in a very approximate human relations kind of environment, and the real task is to try to inspire people, not necessarily to follow you, but inspire people, period, to inspire others.
Yes.
I mean, America is a nation that needs constant inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that by communicating, by showing our imperfections, by showing showing the pureness of our intentions. Well, at least part of the time. We ought to do that. I mean, no one can be it. I laugh at some of these motivational speakers who say, leap and you will be caught and you must live at your fullest potential, endless. My God, I'd burn out in a week if I tried to do that. You've got to, in fighter pilot terms, when you're going for the kill, then you put on the G's, you use the power. Most of the time, I just like to sit in my chair and fly. It's kind of nice out here. The clouds are pretty. But when you're in a fight, that's when you do it, or when the struggle times come, that's when you have to get to your potential. You have to get all the altitude you can. You have to have all the runway in front of you.
Yeah. If you were in constant fight or flight, everyone would need to be on your new hypothyroid drug that you're making with this biotech company. Like, that's not what you want to be. Like, you do not want to be in fight or flight all the time.
Hypothyroid medicine that we have, and it's an extended release T3 for the people in the crowd who are doing it, and it will give you your life back. About 20% of the people in America who suffer from hypothyroidism still feel crummy. I mean, their metabolism's all screwed up, their mental stuff is all screwed up, and we've got something that can fix that group that isn't currently fixed by some of the medicines that are out there. And it's about 20% of the treatable hypothyroid cases, and it just happens to be a $14 billion market that we're, somebody who wants to throw a quick 12 million at us can ride the horse with us.
Well, it just happened. Yeah,
we can be on the market in 2 years. That's serious.
It's really, so the reason why I just brought that up is that fight or flight is because I do work with so many CEOs and type A personalities, a lot of female, like high achievers. And I did find myself working at television stations for 27 years, being that constant fight or flight, working overnight. I did end up with hypothyroidism. And so it is real. It is real. And we all need to make sure that we take care of ourselves and that mindset, and make sure that we meditate and work out or have a therapist like Myrna, because you will ruin your body. Like, you cannot be that high achiever all the time, every day, and in and out.
The body will let you down. I mean, the Russians had a phrase. The Russians are out of favor these days, but they were great for their literature and their phrases. And they said, and I forget which one of the writers it was. No, it wasn't Tolstoy. It was one of the Chekhov, maybe, about if you lose your money, you lose something of value. If you lose your health, you really lose something.
Yeah.
It's hard to fight back if you're really, flat on your back and stuff. You've got to take care of the physical instrument and the mental instrument.
And the mental, right.
If you lose your spirit, you lose everything. You lose everything. So we'll all age. There's an end of that runway we talked about, but we always think it's well out there, and I think that's forces of optimism.
Can I ask you a quick question? You talked about losing your spirit, and you fought for our country. You fought, against an external enemy. And then you end up being, obviously a prisoner of war. And is anything deep?
That was just a waypoint along a long.
I know, but I'm just your spirit, like has your spirit been dampened at all watching our own country become just so at war year after year now, and it just getting worse and worse? Do you feel like it's getting worse and worse? And does that dampen your spirit, seeing our own countrymen fight against each other?
Well, it's a great question. I deal with aspects of that every week in the Third Degree, frankly, the column I write. And it's easy to become dispirited. But remember, we're a fractious people, and the system of government that we have is meant to be competitive and fractious. And we have fought civil wars, and we've, been through all these political machinations over the years. But what troubles me now in this immutable moment, you always think of yourself in an unchangeable or the here and the now, rather than in some kind of longer continuum. And I try to put it in those phrases, but you can lose it. It being America, we can lose it in a generation or two. And it's a generation, there are generations of indulgence. We always argue about the young people and how they're screwing it up.
Every generation does, right?
Every generation gets a chance to screw it up. But the things that trouble me now, personally, is the lack of appreciation for how serious the division based upon identity characteristics can be. I mean, where the racial division, which then gets adapted to not only Black people, but it's brown people, but it's Asian people, and it's women, and there's this intersectionality. And it's like the forces for the purposes of power are trying to drive great wedges into the society, into the American experience, in order to gain power. And if I sound like I'm criticizing the Democrats, I am criticizing the Democrats. On the other hand, I can criticize some of the Republicans as well, especially what I'll call the hard right Republicans. And I think that they are equally worrisome because of their anti-everything kind of expression. I think most Americans just stride the centrist area of our nation with purpose. They want something a little better for their families. They want to have something a little better for their communities. They want to be safe. They want to have an economic outlook that is encouraging. And they look to our representative form of government to do that. And the representative form of government hasn't done that, in part because over the 200 years, almost 250 now, we have let electoral choice evade us. And it started back in the early 1800s with gerrymandering, and it's stayed up to this point. But if you go to elections and it's, well, you're in a safe district and you're in a safe seat, and, you know, of the 435 congressional seats, there's only a few, you know, a handful, well, more than a handful, but 20, 40, 50 that are truly competitive. This is dangerous. We need to have choices. And if we can't have term limits because the Supreme Court years ago ruled against that when my friend John McCain tried to push that through, then we need to make sure that every candidate stands up and says, I will only serve for, and we hold them to it. It needs to be a voluntary commitment, because as professional politician, I think, is the end of, or can make the American experiment extremely difficult to continue, and that's where we are. So, but I worry I come back to the identity politics, and I can't imagine anything more superficial than judging someone on the basis of skin color. I mean, we deal with people on the basis of interaction and mutual respect and regard and need for one another. I mean, I live in a multi-racial community here in Rockford, Illinois. We just had a Memorial Day ceremony at the Logan statue. You know, Major General John A. Logan, the founder of Memorial Day, there at 900 South Michigan. I've been producing, if you will, and narrating that thing for 26 years, from the rededication of the statue at the 100-year point to today. And we have a broad stripe of Americans, business, political, others who come, and we celebrate the fact that our war dead have meaning and died so that we would have a chance to continue this last great hope of mankind we call America. And I think our responsibility is, as people, I'll come back to keep marching, and somehow the invisible hand where we are all working to our self-interest, but mindful that we have an investment in the greater whole, is the great imperative of our lives. So easy to forget.
Self-improvement,
So
but also for the greater good.
Well, yeah, for yourself and for the greater good. I mean, they're inextricably linked. John Gardner writes about that, as you know, in Odd Leadership, how there's that push and that pull. And I use the phrase ambition to be, it's okay to be ambitious, but be ambitious to accomplish something. Richard Nixon, wartime president, the maligned president, said something that I've always remembered. He said, you know, no one is truly whole until they have commitment outside of self. I mean, that's a mouthful. You can live a lifetime searching for that action that makes you feel whole. I too talk to CEOs. I too talk to leaders of large organizations. And some of them, when they square with you, as successful as they may be with all the trappings, still think that they need to do more in order to make their life full, to make their life satisfactory in their own eyes. I think it's a good thing that people are out there striving to find, you know, Man's Search for Meaning, the Viktor Frankl book. And we find it by investing in things outside of ourselves. But we ought not to listen to the siren song of those who seek to control thought and speech. Or worse, if you get into discussions with people and they immediately get mad because you have a countervailing thought, which I think is something we need to struggle against in our discussions. And it's hard. I mean, someone says something A and you think B, and all of a sudden you're both screwing yourselves into the ceiling. You know, it's something to be avoided. The discourse needs to be respectful, or if not respectful,
where did
satirical and humorous. I laugh at it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when we don't remember that we can learn so much from someone else, no matter what their point of view is. I tend to fall into that journalist thing where I think, if it's something I don't believe in, I still am like, well, I got to find out why they do. Like, why are they holding on to this so hard? Like, I need to understand that, because what is my misunderstanding, and it's been hard with a lot of stuff going on lately in the world, when someone is so passionate about something where they literally will only post about that on social media, or start unfriending people who are not their way of thinking. And it's just like, wow, what am I missing that they know? And I want to know what they feel.
Well, it's also a question of balance, where you think one side can get away from calling people all kinds of names with the most intemperate kind of language. I think we have a need for restraint, and I'm much discouraged in some cases, but I'm an optimist. You go back to prison things. We had optimists and pessimists when we were up there in North Vietnam. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. The pessimists thought that we were going to die up there, and they wouldn't even send our bodies home. The optimists, on the other hand, were convinced they would send our bodies home. So, I'm using that as an example of the gallows humor that we need to employ today. And I think that laughter and satire can help get us through a lot of this. But
I would like to ask you, you said, wouldn't you like to know about my imperfections? And
oh yeah,
I would love to go back to that and ask you if you could share them, and if there's anything that I don't want to assume that anyone, a viewer or listener, could learn from, but that I can learn from it, or just be vulnerable.
The whole business of self-confession, is endemic to religion. It's endemic to political movements that are totalitarian in nature. So you want to be sensitive to the broader stripe of what that is. But I will go back to something that Franklin said, and then I'll lead into the imperfection thing. As we wrestle all these issues, personal and professional, political, religious, we mustn't forget human nature. And I think Franklin, in one sentence, captured a lot of it when he said that the basic passion of mankind revolves around avarice and ambition, greed and power. And we need to be acutely sensitive of that as we make our assessments in life, because I think that is a built-in imperfection in human nature. There's nothing, I think, more important from a ritual standpoint in America than the pledge to the flag. And I can recall on short notice being called up in front of a very distinguished group, the Bradley Foundation, actually, in Wisconsin, up at Lake Geneva, for their annual convention. And I was asked to come forward and do the pledge, and I did. I said, well, boy, this is wonderful. So I'm going to do it a little theatrically. And so I said, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation under God, and then turned back to them and said, with liberty and justice for all. Perfect. Nailed it. Sat down, and I'm sitting next to Myrna. She said, you forgot indivisible. I said, what? What? And I asked around the table, I said, people are looking with their heads down. Oh, good, I forgot. We're into the salad course by now, in a room of, 300-400 people. What did I do? I jumped up, went back up, grabbed the microphone and said, I need your attention again just for a moment. I said, the missing word is indivisible. I said, you got to give a bumbling fighter pilot a break here. We can't go through lunch having had the pledge screwed up. Indivisible we are as a nation. Everybody cheered. I put down the mic and went back to my lunch. Shine a light on it is the deal. When you make a mistake, that's a mistake of magnitude. But I'll give you another one. because you make your mistakes in public. I mean, the ones in private that you make, you can slink back to the bathroom, and throw some cold water on your face. But the mistakes that you make are public mistakes. And I'm using the platform because you talk a lot about communications and things. I was called to speak to a large middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, in a very diverse neighborhood. And it was a huge school. It had 600 or 700 kids in it. And there were going to be lots of adults as well, parents, people from the community. And I was told that this was a recognition assembly. And I was told that I had like 6 to 7 minutes to offer whatever remarks I chose to offer. And so I'm sitting up there, and the person who's in charge of this thing came out just 6 or 7, apparently knew I was verbose, 6 or 7 minutes. I got it, 6 or 7 minutes. I said, the only thing we got to do, I'm going to take a minute and make sure we pull back all those black curtains that are covering up the windows to get some light in this place. And I had already pre-briefed a couple of the kids that, it's my turn, grab those things and pull them back. The place was like a tomb. And so the guy is in his warm-up, and going through my credentials for more than they should. And the organizer comes out and she said, we screwed up on the timing. She said, you need to speak an hour. And with that,
no problem.
Said, and no, it's no problem. And the guy said, here's General Borling. So I stood up, and the kids on Mark stood up, curtain, they pulled him back, and we cranked up into this now hour-long speech. In the course of which I was talking about, and each one of the classes had a different color T-shirt on. There was a red one, a yellow one, and a black one. They had it for the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I was talking about the 3 R's, and I found out they didn't know what the 3 R's were: reading, writing, arithmetic. So I was stressing about how to put emphasis on reading. I said, but let's throw off the other 2 R's. Why don't we make it mutual respect and recognition? So reading, mutual respect, and recognition one of another. And so I was kind of riffing on those themes and going through, and I was talking about some world experiences. I've lived all over the world. And I said, I said, when you really get down to it, there's good people, and then there's black people. And as I said it, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, how did that come out? Because I was looking at this kid in one of the black T-shirts. So there's a gasp in the crowd. There's good people and there's black people. Once again, the rule is, and this is the learning point, shine a light on it right away. You're going to make mistakes, put it out there, take the hits. I jumped to the front of the stage, literally. I said, that is the dumbest thing I have ever said on a public platform in my entire life. I meant to say good people and bad people. I said, and I made a mistake, and I'm asking you guys to ride with me on this one, to pass, to forgive my misstatement. I said, are you with me, or should I just leave now? And they all cheered. They all cheered. Later in this hour-long performance, I said, remember when I made that mistake, about 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago? You guys stayed with me. And what I so much appreciate, and I hope you do, is that in life you're going to make mistakes. And all you can do is say, hey, I'm sorry, shine a light on it, try to do your best not to do it again. I just try hard. Yeah,
you do.
I try hard.
Those are incredible communications takeaways, just some, mistakes. They obviously were not great when they happened. They were horrifying when they happened, but your head was so fast and you were ready and you said the right things to shine a light on it and say, I'm sorry. Say, I'm sorry, and shine a light on it. And then you fixed it and you won more fans because of it. Today I think we're going to have to actually boil it down and actually have the takeaways from today, because I'll just mention 2 of my favorites, and then and then I'll let you go. But a leader inspires people to inspire others. Like, a leader is not there out for themselves and to move up. A leader's role is to inspire others to inspire others. I loved survival with honor. Keep marching. Obviously, don't be arrogant. Make time an ally. I loved your comment on why we need liberal arts in our country. Self-improvement for good. For the greater good. Just really, really wonderful advice today, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to share it with me.
It's my privilege, actually, to have a conversation with you, knowing how busy you are, and wish you all success. You're an extraordinary person, and you manage to extract essences from people and situations. So I wish you the best as you continue to march in your professional and your personal life. Look forward to seeing you. Missed you at Memorial Day this year. Mark it on your calendar for next year. Logan Statue, 11 o'clock. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Michigan Avenue.
I'll make you part of the program.
In Chicago, for anyone who wants to come.
Logan Statue, 11 o'clock on Michigan Avenue.
Great.
And for now, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. Is that all right?
Yes. I'll be there next year. Thank you. Good luck.
Okay. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Incredible, right? Now you know why I really wanted to capture this conversation with him and share it. Here were my takeaways. Shine a light on your mistakes right away. Lean on others. Know when to fight. Serve beyond yourself. Look back, but maybe don't stare so long, right? And just keep marching. Thank you, Major General John Borling. Thank you for your service and for continuing to share your wisdom.